She picked up her phone for the last time at 7:14. She looked at the screen. 4 calls, 8 texts, all sent, none answered, and then she set it face down on the white tablecloth. She straightened her posture. She smoothed her napkin across her lap with both hands. And then Margaret Chin, 74 years old, in her blue dress that she saved for occasions, looked at the young waiter. He was standing 3 feet from her table. She had the expression of a woman who had made a decision. She was going to carry it with every bit of dignity she had left. "You can cancel these other reservations," she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. "Nobody's coming." The waiter was 19, kind-faced, a boy named Eli. He had refilled Margaret's water glass 3 times in the past hour. He did it with a careful, heartbroken politeness of someone who understood exactly what was happening at this table. He looked at her with his notepad in his hand and his pen not moving. "Mrs. Chin," he said. "The table for 8, she said. "Just cancel it and bring me the tiramisu, please. It's my birthday." The waiter's pen still wasn't moving. He nodded once. He went back toward the kitchen. The dining room at Bellini's continued around her. The clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation. The warm amber light from the candles that had been burning on the table for over an hour. The good tablecloths, the breadbasket that came without asking. Margaret had made this reservation 6 weeks ago. She had called each of her 4 children personally. She had confirmed twice last week. She had put on the blue dress and taken a cab across town. She arrived at exactly 6 o'clock. She believed that arriving on time was a form of respect for the people you were meeting. It was now 7:16. The table for 8 held 1 woman and 1 empty chair across from her. 6 other chairs were arranged around the white tablecloth like a judgment. The man at the bar had not moved in 40 minutes. Vincent Calabris had come to Bellini's for a private meeting that had ended at 6:30. 2 associates, a discussion that resolved cleanly, no complications. He should have been in his car by 6:45. He had his coat in his hand. He had the car keys. He had walked toward the door. He had passed the table for 8. He had seen Margaret sitting there in her blue dress. Her hands were folded, and her phone was face up on the cloth waiting. He had sat down at the bar instead. He had watched a woman check her phone, with less and less hope, across 74 minutes. He had watched Eli refill her water. He did it with the particular care of someone who was doing the only thing he could do. He had watched her face do something he recognized. It was the specific practiced composure of someone who had decided that their dignity was the only thing that was fully theirs in this moment. They were keeping it no matter what. He had watched her set the phone face down. He had watched her straighten. He had heard her tell Eli to cancel the reservations. Vincent set his drink on the bar. He stood. He picked up the drink. He walked across the dining room. He was not a man who made scenes. He was not a man who inserted himself into strangers' evenings for the sake of performance. He had spent 40 years learning the difference between intervention and intrusion. He knew which side of that line he needed to stay on. He stopped beside Margaret's table. She looked up. He looked at her for a moment, not with pity, not with the performed sympathy of someone doing a good deed. He looked with the specific, unhurried attention of a man who saw a person clearly. "Mrs. Chin," he said, "I'm sorry to intrude." He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "I'm Vincent. I haven't eaten yet." He paused. "Would you allow me the company?" She looked at him. She looked at him the way Margaret Chin apparently looked at everything. It was a full assessment of a woman who had been reading people for 74 years and had no intention of stopping. She looked at his eyes. She looked at the drink in his hand. She looked at the chair he had indicated. "Do you like tiramisu?" she asked. He held her gaze. "It's my favorite," he said. She nodded once. "Then sit down," she said. "And happy birthday to me." Vincent sat across from Margaret Chin. He set his drink on the table between them. He didn't yet know what she was going to tell him over the next 2 hours. He didn't yet know that the woman sitting across from him in her carefully saved blue dress carried a secret. It was a secret that had been kept from him for 15 years. A secret that had reshaped his life without his knowledge. A secret that 4 absent children had inherited without ever having chosen to carry it. He didn't know, but he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Eli brought the tiramisu. He brought 2 portions without being asked. This was either excellent intuition or an act of kindness, so instinctive he hadn't consciously decided on it. He set them down and looked at Vincent with a brief, assessing look. It was the look of someone determining whether this was a good development or a complicated one, and quietly withdrew. Margaret looked at the 2 portions. She looked at Vincent. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," he said. "Most people would have looked away," she said. "I know that too," he said. She picked up her spoon. The tiramisu at Bellini's was the kind that came in a small ceramic ramekin dusted with cocoa powder. The lady fingers were soaked to the exact right consistency. Not soggy, not dry, the precise expression of a recipe that had been made the same way for 22 years. Margaret took a bite. She closed her eyes for 1 second. She opened them. My husband George used to say that tiramisu was the most honest dessert, she said. He said it was because it had nothing to hide behind. It was either good or it wasn't. Was he right? Vincent asked. About most things, she said. Not all things, but most. Vincent looked at his portion. He picked up his spoon. Margaret watched him take a bite. She had the focused attention of someone who had spent decades feeding people, and she still found the moment of their first taste worth watching. Good, he said. It's very good, she agreed. They ate in a comfortable silence for a moment, not the uncomfortable silence of strangers who have nothing to say. It was the specific warmer silence of two people who have acknowledged each other's presence. They were letting that acknowledgement settle before adding words to it. Your birthday? Vincent asked. 74, she said without drama. Just the number, a significant one, he said. They're all significant, she said. The ones after 70 you don't take for granted. He nodded. He looked at the 6 empty chairs. He didn't comment on them. She looked at him, not commenting on them either. You can ask, she said, if you want to. It's your birthday, he said. The asking can wait, she looked at him. Something shifted in her expression. Not dramatically, just slightly. It was the specific micro-adjustment of a person encountering something unexpected and filing it away. You have children, she said. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. Not in the way most people mean. She looked at him. What's the other way? She asked. He thought about it. There are people I've looked after, he said. Over the years, people who needed looking after. He paused. Not blood, but present. Margaret looked at her tiramisu. That counts, she said. George always said blood was the starting point, not the whole point. George sounds like a wise man, Vincent said. He was, she said. He died 9 years ago. She said it the way people said things they had made peace with. Plainly, without performance. The fact of it settled into its permanent place. 9 years is long enough that I've learned to live without him, she said, but not enough to stop missing him. Vincent looked at the candles on the table. He thought about his own father. He thought about a dinner table a long time ago that had been full and warm. And then, in the specific way that things ended in his world, had simply become quiet. He didn't say any of this. He just sat with it privately the way he sat with most things. Your children, he said. 4, I heard you tell the waiter. 4, she said. David, Susan, Michael, and Lily. She said the names with the particular evenness of someone who loved each of them without ranking them. David is in Seattle. Susan is in Atlanta. Michael is here, 20 minutes from this restaurant. Lily is in Chicago, a long way for some of them to come, Vincent said. Michael is 20 minutes away, she said. She said it simply without added weight, but the weight was there. Vincent picked up his drink. He held it without drinking. He looked at the table. He thought about a 20-minute drive that hadn't happened. He thought about what kind of thing made a drive that short not happen on your mother's 74th birthday. How long have you lived in this city? He asked. 41 years, she said. George and I moved here when David was 2. We raised all 4 here. The house on Elmwood Street, the same house. She looked at the table. I still live there alone. Since George, he asked. Yes, she said. She picked up her spoon. She turned it in her fingers without using it. They have their lives, she said. The children, their work, their families. I understand that. She looked at the spoon. I made their lives. I understand how lives fill up. Vincent watched her turn the spoon. But, he said. She looked up at him. No but, she said. I understand it. That's the whole sentence. She set the spoon down. Understanding something doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Both things can be true simultaneously. Vincent held her gaze. He thought to himself that this woman had been sitting at this table, with both things true simultaneously, for the past hour and 15 minutes. And she hadn't let either of them make her smaller. It's a remarkable dress, he said. She looked at him. It's the blue one I save, she said. I had nowhere to save it for after George, so I started saving it for my birthday. He looked at the dress. He looked at her. He thought, I am going to find out what happened to the 4 children who made this woman sit alone in her saved dress. He didn't yet know that one of those 4 children was carrying something that would hit him like a physical impact when he heard it. The tiramisu was finished. Eli had brought coffee, real coffee, the kind Bellini's made, with imported beans that cost more than they told you. And a small plate of almond biscotti that neither of them had ordered, and both of them accepted without comment. The dining room had thinned. It was 8:40. Most of the tables around them had turned. The ambient noise had dropped to a warmer, quieter register. The restaurant was settling into its late evening mode. Candles lower, voices softer. Margaret and Vincent had been talking for 90 minutes. They had talked about George. They talked about how he had been a civil engineer who built bridges for 30 years. He found this deeply funny as a metaphor for his life, because he was also the person everyone came to when they needed connecting. They had talked about the house on Elmwood and its garden. Margaret still maintained it herself, except for the heavy lifting, which she contracted out without shame. They had talked about Vincent's connection to the city, his buildings, his properties, the legitimate face of a career that had other dimensions she didn't ask about, and he didn't explain. They had talked carefully and honestly. They spoke with the specific mutual respect of two people who recognized each other's intelligence and chose to meet it directly. Then Margaret said, "You said you've been searching for something for 15 years. Vincent looked at her. He had not said that. He had not said anything close to that. "I didn't say that," he said. "No," she agreed. "But you have the look of a man who has." She looked at her coffee. George had that look for a while, after his brother's family disappeared. It took him 4 years to stop looking. Vincent was very still. His brother's family, he said. They had a falling out, Margaret said. George and his brother Robert, she said. It was over money, a business dispute. The kind that families have and sometimes survive and sometimes don't. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Robert took his family and moved away. George never knew where. She paused. He looked for 4 years. He finally decided he had to let it go. Vincent looked at the table. Did George ever find out what happened to Robert? He asked. Margaret looked at her coffee. A pause. Not a thoughtless pause, but a deliberate one. The pause of someone deciding something. Robert died, she said, 8 years after the move. His wife contacted us just once with a letter. She said he was gone and she thought we deserved to know. Did you know her? Vincent asked. Robert's wife. I met her twice, Margaret said. Before the falling out, she was a lovely woman, very quiet, very private. She looked at the table. She had a son. Vincent's hand on the coffee cup went still. The son, he said. What happened to him? Margaret looked at him. She looked at him with the full careful attention she had been directing at him all evening. The 74 years of reading people applied completely to this moment. She had been thinking about this since the coffee arrived. She had been deciding. What's your full name? She asked. Vincent looked at her. Calabris, he said. Vincent Calabris. Margaret's breath caught just slightly. It was the small physical response of confirmation arriving. She set her cup down. She looked at the table. George's brother was named Robert Calabris, she said. The dining room continued around them. Candles burning. Soft conversations. The ordinary business of a restaurant in its late hour. Vincent didn't move. Robert's son, Margaret said carefully. He was very young when they moved. 5, I think, maybe 6. She looked at Vincent. George talked about him sometimes. The boy's name was Thomas, Vincent said. His voice was not entirely controlled. Margaret looked at him. You know that name, she said. Thomas Calabris, Vincent said. My cousin, my father's nephew. He looked at the table. He disappeared with Robert's family when I was 18. My father spent 2 years looking. He died, my father, before he found anything. He paused. I picked up the search when I was old enough to do it properly. 15 years ago. Margaret pressed both hands flat on the tablecloth. She looked at this man who had walked across the dining room to sit with a lonely woman on her birthday. She looked at him for a long time. Thomas's mother, she said carefully. After Robert died, she needed help. She came to us, to George and me. She and Thomas lived in our house for 2 years. She paused. Thomas was 13. He called George uncle, even though the relationship was more complicated than that. Another pause. He called me Grandma, Margaret, from the first week. Vincent was very still. He was doing the thing he did when something significant was arriving. It was the absolute controlled stillness of a man who had learned to hold himself together while important information landed. Where is Thomas now? He asked. Margaret looked at him. He is 41, she said. He lives in Portland. She paused. He calls me every Sunday. Vincent looked at the table. He pressed his lips together. He breathed. And he doesn't know, he said, about me? About my father's family? Margaret was quiet. His mother never told him the full story. She said she was protecting him from the pain of a family that she felt he had been left behind by. She paused. She died 3 years ago without telling him. Vincent looked up. He thinks he has no family, he said. He thinks, Margaret said gently, that he has me and the Sunday calls in the house on Elmwood. She held Vincent's gaze. He doesn't know his father's family has been looking for him. The candles burned. The restaurant was quiet around them. 2 people at a table for 8, one of them in a blue dress, one of them with 15 years of searching behind him. They sat across from each other in the specific silence of something impossible becoming real. How do I reach him? Vincent asked. Margaret looked at him for a long moment. First she said, Tell me who you are. All of it, not the buildings and the properties. She looked at him directly. All of it. And what Vincent Calabres told her next, the whole truth, the real shape of his life, was going to determine whether Margaret Chin made a phone call to Portland. He told her, not everything. There were things no one outside his world needed to carry. But he told her the essential shape of it. What he was, what he had built. He explained how he had come to be the man sitting in a good restaurant in an expensive suit at 9 in the evening on a Tuesday. Having stumbled into the search he had been running for 15 years. Margaret listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't perform shock or judgment. She listened the way she apparently did most things. With complete patient attention, letting him finish before she sorted through what she had heard. When he finished, the coffee cups were cold. George knew men like you, she said. Not the same. It was a different world, a different city, but the same category. She looked at her cup. He never judged by category. He judged by the particular. And the particular? She looked at him. You walked across a dining room to sit with an old woman on her birthday, she said. The particular says what it says. He looked at the table. He had been bracing for the judgment, he had told her, because she asked for all of it. And he had decided on the cab ride to this restaurant tonight, not knowing any of this was coming, planning only a routine meeting. He decided that he was too old to perform a version of himself that was easier for rooms to receive. He was who he was. Margaret had heard it and filed it as the particular says what it says. My father, he said. His relationship with Robert was complicated, like most things between brothers. He looked at his hands. My father was the older one. He built something. Robert wanted to be part of it. And then he wanted to be away from it. And then, the money dispute Margaret mentioned was real, but it was also about my father's world. Robert wanted out of everything connected to it, including you, Margaret said. I was 18, Vincent said. Not really part of it yet, but close enough that Robert didn't want Thomas around me. He paused. I understood that later. I didn't understand it then. He paused again. Then my father died, and the only family I had left was a cousin who didn't know I existed. He looked at the candle between them. I started looking when I was 26. It was the thing I could do for my father that he hadn't been able to do for himself. Margaret looked at the candle too. Thomas talked about his father, she said, to George when he lived with us. He was 13 and processing a grief he didn't fully have language for. She paused. He said Robert was a man who was always either too close or too far, never the right distance. She looked at Vincent. He had the insight of a child who had watched his parents very carefully for 13 years. Was he happy? Vincent asked. When he lived here, he was sad, she said. And then he was sad and okay. And then he was okay more than sad. That is the trajectory for grief when people are around you. She looked at the table. George was very good at being around. He had a specific talent for presence. He could sit in the same room as another person's pain without needing to fix it or move away from it. She pressed her lips together. Thomas needed that. He had a lot of pain to sit with. Vincent was quiet. And the 4 children, he said. Your 4, did they know Thomas? David and Susan were already adults, she said. They were kind to him, but they were away at school, then working. He overlapped with Michael and Lily more. She paused. Michael and Thomas were close for a few years. Michael is 6 years older, she stopped. Something shifted in her voice. Vincent noticed. Michael, he said. She looked at the tablecloth. Michael, she said carefully, has had a difficult decade. She was choosing her words with the specific care of a mother who loved a child and was being honest about him simultaneously. He was doing well for a long time. His own business, a marriage. Another pause. The marriage ended. The business had problems. He got into some debt situations that I only partially know the details of. She looked at the empty chairs. He hasn't been available the way he used to be for Sunday dinners, for calls. She looked at the chair that was specifically empty to her right. It was the seat that was Michael's seat in the geography of family dinners for birthdays. Vincent looked at the chair. He thought about a 20-minute drive that hadn't happened. The debt situations, he said carefully. Who is he in debt with? Margaret looked at him. I don't know their names, she said. He doesn't tell me. He's protecting me from worrying. She said it the way she said most things, plainly without accusation, which is a kindness that costs me more than knowing would. Vincent absorbed this. He thought about the various people in the city to whom the phrase debt situations applied. He thought about a woman sitting alone at a table for 8. He thought about a son who is 20 minutes away and hadn't come. He had a feeling, the specific practiced instinct of someone who had spent decades connecting information, that these two things were connected. Margaret, he said. She looked at him. When Michael doesn't come, he said, do you think it's because he doesn't want to? She was quiet. She looked at the empty chair. No, she said. I don't think it's because he doesn't want it. She pressed her hand flat on the tablecloth. I think Michael is somewhere right now. That has nothing to do with wanting. Vincent looked at her hand on the tablecloth. He looked at her face. He made a decision. He pulled out his phone. Who else do you know that Michael owes money to? He asked. Anyone, a name, a business, anything you've heard. She looked at him. One name, she said. He mentioned it once. Maybe 8 months ago. He thought I was asleep in the next room. She said the name. Vincent's jaw tightened. The name was one he knew. The name was one that changed the urgency of tonight considerably. He had come to Bellini's for a routine meeting that ended cleanly. He was about to discover that the evening was significantly less finished than he had thought. The name was Dario Cash. Vincent knew Dario the way a city knew its weather, as a permanent atmospheric feature that affected everything around it. Cash ran a loan operation on the east side. It was the specific kind that found people who needed money fast, and charged rates that were designed to compound beyond repayment. Not because Cash needed the interest, because Cash needed the leverage. People who couldn't pay Dario Cash didn't go to court. They went somewhere else. Vincent looked at Margaret across the candlelit table and felt the evening reconfigure around him. How long ago did Michael take the loan? He asked. I don't know for certain, she said. The business problem started about 18 months ago, and he's been pulling away for 10 months, Vincent had said. Approximately, she said. Vincent looked at his phone. He calculated 18 months to get into trouble, 10 months of pulling away. A mother's birthday not attended. Men who owed Dario cash and fell behind on payments did not have the freedom to attend birthday dinners at nice restaurants. They were too busy managing what happened when they didn't comply with Cash's instructions. Margaret, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it completely. You've been honest with me, she said. I'll do the same. Michael, he said, has he said anything at all in the last few months, about needing to do things he didn't want to do? About people asking him to help with something that made him uncomfortable? Margaret's hands pressed harder on the tablecloth. He asked me once, she said, 3 months ago. He called at 11 at night, very late for Michael. He's always been early to bed. And he asked me if I had savings, if I had enough to not have to worry. What did you say? Vincent asked. I told him I was fine, she said. I told him George had planned well and I had enough. She looked at the table. He said, good, that was the whole call. She paused. He sounded like a man who had been hoping for a different answer. Vincent stood. He was already dialing. Don't be alarmed, he said to Margaret. I'm going to make one call, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. She looked at him. She looked at the phone in his hand. She nodded once. He walked to the bar. He called a man named Carver, not the restaurant, a person. A man with the specific surname and the specific role of someone who knew where people were in the city when they needed to be found. Michael Chin, he said, 48 years old. Dario Cash's name is connected to him. Find him now. Carver said 12 minutes. Vincent went back to the table. He sat. He looked at Margaret. She was watching him with the expression he had been watching all evening. Steady, assessing, doing the full reading. You're going to help him, she said. I'm going to find out what the situation is, he said. And then I'm going to address it. Because of Thomas, she said. Because you need me to call Thomas, and you're not going to ask me to do it while Michael is in trouble. He held her gaze. Both things are true, he said. I want to help Michael because he's your son, and he shouldn't be in this situation. And yes, I'm also aware that you're the person who can reach Thomas. She looked at him. That's an honest answer, she said. You asked for honesty, he said. She looked at the candle. George would have liked you, she said. He would have disapproved of your business and respected your directness and liked you anyway. Vincent looked at the candle too. I'll take that, he said. His phone buzzed. Carver. He looked at the screen. The text was an address. A building on the east side. A commercial property that had legitimate tenant listings on the ground floor and considerably less legitimate activities above it. Cash's secondary location. Michael Chin's cell phone had been pinged to within a block of that building 20 minutes ago. Vincent looked at the address. He looked at Margaret. I have a location, he said, go. She looked at him. Something moved through her expression, the specific complicated feeling of a mother who understood that the stranger who had sat down at her birthday table was about to try to retrieve her son from somewhere she couldn't follow. He's not a bad person, she said. Michael, he made bad decisions when he was desperate. He's not a bad person. I know, Vincent said. How do you know? She asked. You've never met him. Because you raised him, Vincent said, and the particular says what it says. She stared at him. For the first time all evening, her composure shifted. Not collapsed, just bent slightly. The specific bending of someone who has been holding something tightly and has been offered a moment where they don't have to. Go, she said. Her voice was steady. He stood. He put his jacket on. He looked at her. Stay here, he said. Eli will bring you whatever you want. I'll call you when I know something. She nodded. He walked out of Bellini's into the November night. The situation at the East Side building was not going to be simple. Cash's operations were not designed for simple. But Vincent Calabres had been navigating situations like this for 25 years, and he had not once gone into one of them planning to fail. He was not planning to fail tonight. He had a woman in a blue dress waiting at a table. He had a phone call to Portland to facilitate when he got back. He had no time for failure. The building on Kessler Street was 4 stories of commercial brick. It was the kind of building that had been useful to multiple types of operations across 50 years without ever looking remarkable from the outside. Vincent arrived with 2 associates, not loudly, not with confrontation as the plan. He had learned across 25 years that confrontation was the last tool, not the first one. He knew that men like Dario Cash responded more reliably to the specific quiet pressure of someone who understood leverage better than they did. He went in through the front. The ground floor was a printing business, closed for the evening, lights off, the smell of ink and paper, a stairwell at the back. He went up. Second floor, a door at the end of the hallway, light under it, voices behind it. He knocked. The voices stopped. Footsteps. The door opened. A man looked at him. Not Cash. An associate in his mid-30s, with the specific physical confidence of someone paid to be intimidating. Private, the man said. I know, Vincent said. Tell Dario that Vincent Calabres would like a word. The man's expression didn't change on the surface, but something behind his eyes recalibrated. He closed the door. There was a conversation behind it that Vincent couldn't fully hear. Voices, then a silence, then footsteps. The door opened again. Dario Cash was 57. He was compact with silver hair, and the particular groomed precision of a man who wanted to project control, even in informal settings. He had small eyes that moved quickly across the space, cataloging, assessing, recalculating. He looked at Vincent. He looked at the 2 men behind Vincent. Vincent, he said, this is unexpected. I'm looking for someone, Vincent said. Michael Chin, he came in to speak with you this evening. Cash's expression didn't flicker. I have a lot of conversations, he said. This one you'll remember, Vincent said. Mid-40s, under significant pressure about a debt that's compounded past reasonable repayment. His mother is having her birthday dinner alone at Bellini's tonight, because Michael is here instead of there. Cash looked at him. Your interest in him? He asked. His mother is a friend, Vincent said simply. Cash looked at the 2 men behind Vincent. He looked at Vincent. He made the calculation that men in his position made, a calculation about who is across from him, and what the specific cost-benefit of various responses looked like. He's in the back room, Cash said, having a conversation about his options. I'd like to contribute to that conversation, Vincent said. Cash stepped back. Vincent went through. The back room was smaller. A table, chairs, industrial lighting that made everyone in it look tired. Michael Chin was at the table across from 2 of Cash's people. He was 48, with his mother's bone structure. He had the specific tight quality of a man who had been afraid for a long time, and had gotten very good at not showing it in his posture, but was showing it in the skin around his eyes. He looked up when Vincent came in. He didn't know who Vincent was. Vincent pulled out the chair beside him and sat down. He looked at Cash's people across the table. Give us a minute, he said. They looked at Cash, who had come in behind Vincent. Cash nodded. They left. Cash remained. Vincent looked at Michael. My name is Vincent Calabres, he said. Your mother Margaret is at Bellini's right now, waiting for her birthday dinner to arrive. She's been alone since 6. I sat with her. He watched Michael's face do several things in rapid sequence. She's all right, Vincent said. She doesn't know I'm here, but I'm here because of her and because of what I heard tonight, and because the situation you're in doesn't have to continue the way it's been going. Michael looked at the table. His jaw worked. You don't know what the situation is, he said. I know enough, Vincent said. You took a loan you couldn't repay on original terms. The terms were designed to compound. You're now at a point where Cash's ask has shifted from financial repayment to operational assistance. He held Michael's gaze. What has he asked you to do? Michael was quiet. Michael, Vincent said, your mother is 74 years old. She put on her good dress and took a cab to a restaurant, and she sat alone for over an hour. She's not sitting alone because you don't love her. She's sitting alone because someone has made your life too small to go to birthday dinners. He paused. Tell me what he's asked you to do. The jaw worked again. He has a supply business, Michael said, moving things through logistics networks. He needed access to certain documentation systems. My company handles compliance documentation for 3 distribution companies. He looked at the table. He wanted me to create backdated compliance certification so his supply chain would look clean when it moved through. Vincent looked at Cash. Cash, to his credit, met his gaze without flinching. The debt amount, Vincent said to Cash. Current, what does Michael owe you? 48,000, Cash said. I'll pay it, Vincent said. Tonight, the full amount, clean. He held Cash's gaze. In exchange for the documentation Michael has already created being returned to him and destroyed. And for Michael's involvement in your supply chain operation ending now, completely. Cash looked at him. The calculation again. The documentation is more useful to me than the money, Cash said. No, it isn't, Vincent said. The documentation creates criminal liability for Michael and therefore leverage over him. But it also creates criminal liability for you, if Michael ever decides the leverage is worse than the exposure. He looked at Cash steadily. I'm offering you clean money, a clean exit, and the removal of a human liability from your operation. That's a better outcome for you than the documentation. Cash was quiet. He looked at Michael. He looked at Vincent. He named a number. Vincent looked at him. That's 63% above the stated debt amount, Vincent said. Call it a processing fee, Cash said. Vincent held his gaze for 3 seconds. Done, he said. He made a call. He arranged the transfer. Cash confirmed receipt 15 minutes later. Michael sat at the table with his hands flat on the surface. He had the expression of a man who was watching his life reconfigure around an event he hadn't anticipated and couldn't fully process yet. Why? Michael asked Vincent quietly. You don't know me, I know your mother, Vincent said, and I know that she raised a person who is sitting at this table, looking like a man who got into something he didn't fully understand and has been trying to manage it alone ever since. He paused. That description fits a lot of people I've respected. Michael looked at the table. The documentation, he said. If Cash doesn't follow through, he will, Vincent said. We have an understanding, a pause. How do I? Michael started. You go to Bellini's, Vincent said. Right now. Your mother is at the table for 8 in the blue dress she saves for occasions. The tiramisu is very good. He stood. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Michael stood. He looked at Vincent. He didn't have words. Vincent understood this. Go, he said. Michael went. Michael walked into Bellini's at 10:14. Margaret saw him from across the dining room. She didn't stand immediately. She sat perfectly still for 2 seconds. The 2 seconds of a person absorbing the arrival of something they had stopped expecting. Then she stood. Michael crossed the dining room. He stopped at the table. He looked at his mother. He looked at her good blue dress and the tiramisu ramekin with the spoon still in it and the 6 empty chairs around the table. Mom, he said. She looked at him. Her expression was the one that belonged only to mothers in the specific moment of seeing their child after something difficult. Not the composed face she had shown the dining room for the past 2 hours, but the real one. The one that was relief and love and grief and accusation and forgiveness all arriving at the same time. Sit down, she said. He sat. Not across from her but beside her, in the chair that had always been his at family dinners. She had arranged the seating even tonight, even alone. It was the habitual way of a woman who had been setting tables for 40 years. He sat in his chair. He looked at his hands. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at him. Tell me everything, she said. So he did. Not tonight. Tonight was not the right container for everything. Tonight was the starting point, the commitment to telling. He talked for 40 minutes. Margaret listened. She asked 2 questions at specific moments, not to redirect, but to make sure she had understood correctly. She didn't cry. She didn't perform shock. She absorbed what he told her with the specific patient capacity of a woman who had been absorbing things for 74 years. When he finished, she put her hand over his on the table. She held it. You should have told me, she said. I know, he said. I'm not fragile, she said. I managed this family for 40 years without George thinking I was fragile. I raised 4 children in this city. I sat alone at this table tonight for an hour and 15 minutes, and I didn't break. She looked at him. I am not fragile, Michael. He looked at her hand on his. No, he said, you're not. Vincent came back at 10:37. He stood in the entrance of Bellini's for a moment and looked across the dining room. He saw Margaret and Michael at the table. The blue dress, the son in the chair beside her hand on his. He went to the bar. He ordered a coffee. He sat at the bar and drank it. He gave them the time. At 11 o'clock, Margaret looked up. She saw him at the bar. She caught his eye. She tilted her head toward the table. He came over. He sat in the empty chair across from them. He looked at Michael. Michael looked at him. Michael said, who you are, what you did tonight. He paused, and who Thomas is to you. Vincent was quiet. She told you about Thomas, he said. She tells me everything, Michael said. I used to think that was the problem. Too much closeness, too much knowledge of each other. He looked at the tablecloth. I was wrong about that. He looked at Vincent. Thomas called me once about 7 years ago, out of the blue. He said he was coming through the city and wanted to know if Michael Chin was the same Michael who used to let him use the good side of his skateboard. He paused. He was. We had coffee. We stayed in touch. Vincent looked at him. Thomas and you are still in contact, he said. Yes, Michael said. Vincent held himself very still. Would you be willing, he said carefully, to tell him that someone from his father's family has been looking for him? Michael looked at his mother. Margaret looked at Vincent. I'll call him tomorrow, Michael said. First thing. The dining room was nearly empty now. Eli was clearing the last tables with the quiet efficiency of a closing shift. The candles had burned low. Margaret looked at the table, at the ramekin from the tiramisu, at the coffee cups, at the man who had walked across a dining room and sat with her. You came for a routine meeting tonight, she said. Yes, Vincent said, and instead, she said, you found your cousin's last connection to the city, got my son out of a dangerous situation, and ate tiramisu. The tiramisu was excellent, he said. She looked at him. She looked at him with the full 74 years of reading people. George would have called this fate, she said. What do you call it? He asked. She looked at the low candles. A Tuesday that didn't go the way either of us planned, she said, which turned out to be better than the plan. He looked at her. Happy birthday, Margaret, he said. She looked at him. Thank you for sitting down, she said. Thomas came to the city in March, not immediately. There were months of calls first, Michael calling Thomas and Vincent talking on the phone for 90 minutes the first time, which was 40 minutes longer than Vincent had planned for and had still not covered everything. Letters, which Vincent wrote in the specific, careful way of someone who understood that some things needed to be committed to paper rather than set into a phone. He came in March. He was 41 years old, with his father, Robert's build, and his mother's eyes, and a laugh that arrived without warning and filled the room, which seemed to be a Calabrese trait because it was also the way Vincent's father had laughed. He came in March, and they had dinner, not at Bellini's but at the house on Elmwood Street. Margaret made the dinner herself, the full production, the kind that took 2 days of preparation and filled the kitchen with smells that were specific and warm, and impossible to replicate anywhere else. Thomas sat at the kitchen table and watched her cook. He watched with the focused attention of someone storing a memory they intended to keep. You cooked like this when I was 13, he said. I cooked like this for everyone, she said. The quantity adjusts. The cooking doesn't. He looked at her. I've missed this kitchen, he said. The kitchen misses having people in it, she said. The two things are compatible. Vincent sat at the kitchen table across from Thomas. He was still learning the shape of his cousin. The gestures, the expressions, the specific humor that arrived sideways in the middle of a serious conversation. He was learning him the way you learned someone you had not known you were missing, and now found yourself unexpectedly grateful for. Thomas looked at him. You looked for me for 15 years, he said. Yes, Vincent said. Why? Thomas asked, not challenging but genuinely asking. It was the same genuine ask Vincent had been getting from everyone in this story. Because your father was my uncle, Vincent said. Because my father died before he found you. Because a debt to the dead doesn't stop being a debt because they're not there to collect it. He paused, and because some searches deserve to end. Thomas looked at him. He looked at Margaret. He looked back at Vincent. My mother never told me, he said. I know, Vincent said. She was protecting me, he said, from a grief she thought would be unresolvable. He paused. She was wrong, but she wasn't wrong for the reasons she thought she was. He looked at his hands. She didn't know your father had already died. She didn't know you were looking. He looked at Vincent. She thought she was protecting me from rejection. Vincent was quiet. He thought about Robert. He thought about a family that had fractured over money and pride, and the kind of distance that started as a principle and ended as a geography. He thought about a search that had lasted 15 years, because the information was always just out of reach. He thought about a woman in a blue dress, setting her phone face down on a white tablecloth. He thought about sitting down. Michael was at the table by dinner. He had started being at more tables. He was in a process. The honest, unglamorous process of addressing what needed to be addressed, with the specific professional help he had finally accepted he needed. It was not a straight line. Margaret didn't pretend it was a straight line, but she also didn't pretend she wasn't watching it, or that it didn't matter to her. Because both of those would have been untrue. Her watching mattered. Thomas called Margaret every Sunday. He called from Portland, and she answered in the kitchen on Elmwood Street. They talked for 40 minutes on average, which was the duration their conversations had always been, and which Margaret found reassuringly consistent. This is what this story is really about. Not the search, not Cash's office on the east side, not the debt or the documentation. It is about a woman who put on her good dress and went to dinner alone, who set her phone face down and straightened her posture, and said in a perfectly steady voice, "Cancel the reservations. Nobody's coming," and who was still there, still at the table, still in the dress. And a man who walked across the room and sat down, not to rescue her, not to fix anything, just to sit, and in the sitting, everything connected that had been waiting to connect.